Welcome to Homeschool Your Way. I'm your host, Janna Cook, and Bookshark's community manager. Today, I am honored to introduce my guest, Ginny Yurich, founder of 1,000 Hours Outside. She is a homeschool mom of 5, and her passion to bring back the balance between the virtual and the outside worlds, it comes alive in her new book, Until the Streetlights Come On. Ginny is here to encourage us with her homeschool journey. Ginny, welcome to the podcast.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
I can't believe that you said yes, first of all, because you are a very busy woman. You are a homeschool mom of 5. You're an author. You're a speaker. You're getting outdoors 1,000 hours in a year. So you read abundantly. How do you find the time?
I have no idea. People are always asking that question, right? I think that I just come at each day, and I've always done this with what's the most important, and then a lot of the other things drop. And so that's what we do. So for example, here's an example. I don't know when this goes live, but today is November 29th. And we have this free outdoor advent calendar with these fun little ideas that you can put in a little advent calendar for December. And it comes out, December 1st is the first day. And actually, that's probably wrong because I think Advent is actually like 4 weeks. I don't know. I think I'm wrong with it. It starts on a Friday. But anyway, we just do it like starting on December 1st to December 24th. And I just posted about it today because, because it's like in 2 days. And so that's kind of how we operate. It's like, what needs to happen today, we do that. And then lots of other things drop.
Yeah. Well, I think it's being intentional with what you're passionate about. So just so you know, I did download the
It was
Advent
a better
today.
answer than mine. You're like, yeah, let me tell you what your answer should be.
No, I'm not the author here. I'm not the speaker. I am the one that just gets to talk to you about all these things that you have done to encourage not only just homeschool families, but families in general. And it's something that really has resonated with all communities. It shows by your Instagram following of over 550,000 people. I mean, that's huge. Obviously, your message is something that people are hungry for. So let's start with what 1,000 Hours Outside is.
Okay, here's what it is. It is a goal to get outside for 1,000 hours in a year. That's it. That's all that it is. But as simple as it sounds, it's not very easy, partially just because of how busy we are as a society, partially because of how much pressure we feel as parents, and partially just because no kids are playing outside anymore. So it's not as easy to shoo your kids out the front door to go play with the neighborhood kids. But even though it's a simple premise, the impact is really profound because it is helping your kids develop in every facet, in every way that they could possibly develop their cognition, their social skills, their emotional well being, their physical health, for those who are interested, the spirituality. And it also, if you're going together as a family, it's helping to bring you closer and to form all sorts of bonds. So that's what it is. And it is one of those things that has really caught on across the globe. There are families from all walks of life who are joining in. So families that homeschool and families that don't homeschool, and families that both parents work or they're single mom or any of the different situations that people aim for it. Maybe they aim for something that's even a little bit smaller, but they're just being intentional and celebrating those hands-on moments in a technological world.
I will say that as a young mother of a set of twin girls, and then another one came into our family, I want to be very honest. I wasn't happy in motherhood. I mean, and you kind of talked about that a little bit in your book, and I thought, what's wrong with me? I'm
Mm.
supposed to be so happy. I wanted these children, and I'm sitting in my house, and I felt like I was dying inside. I remember getting in the shower and just crying and be like, this maybe I just wasn't cut out for this. Like, what?
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a mom. I was excited to be married and have kids. And when I started leaving my house and doing activities with my kids, like just things as I'm reading through your book, I was like, oh, we did that. Yes, check the box. I'm like
Mm.
or maybe reverse engineering it. I'm like saying, I'm patting myself on the back as I look back because I was like, yes,
Sure.
okay. I had a community of new moms. We moved into a new neighborhood and we all had kids around the same time. So we would get together. Those were the best days
Mhm.
because our kids were playing. We were being able to, talk and whether it was laugh or cry or whatever it was. There
Mhm.
were times though where I was like, why are my kids the ones that won't leave me alone? Everyone else's kids are
Yeah.
playing, but it was those times. And I think the honesty of that, sometimes parenthood, a lot of times parenthood is not what we thought it was, or we read about,
Mhm.
or we see in the movies. And instead of thinking something's wrong with us, you really gave me and others permission to say, what's wrong with how we're doing it?
Mm. Yeah, because I think that is the thing. I in other cultures, and I really read a transformational, I guess, book this past year called Hunt, Gather, Parent by Michaeline Duclef. And there was a sentence in there that really stuck with me. And she said that in certain cultures, they say a mother is never alone with a crying baby. I was like, whoa, what would your motherhood experience be like if that were true? You're never alone with a crying baby. There's always someone there, an aunt, a friend, a cousin, someone's there to support you. And I think part of it is that we're just alone and we're disconnected from nature, and nature naturally engages children. And so it takes the pressure off of us as mothers. And that community aspect is so important. And so it isn't, I think, that we are bad moms. It's just that I do think, I mean, I think I did it wrong. When I started when I became a mom and started having these kids, and I was miserable. I got so miserable. I love my kids and I was like, this is awful. And I just think it was a change in how I was doing it. And at that time, I think it's talked about more, but at that time, no one was really talking about like, hey, one of the keys is your kid should be outside.
Yeah. And I think what compounded my situation was I kind of felt like we were being a little countercultural by staying home, especially in the community that we were in. It was like, oh, you're not going to put you're staying home with your kids, but you have degrees, you have skills. Why are you staying home with your kids? And so it was this added pressure of I've got to do this right, but I'm miserable. So what am I doing wrong? This was my choice. It's my bed. I got to lay in it. And it was when I started to get outside the house, to take my kids outside, doing those fun things, that it really made a difference. And then I think that translated into our homeschool so well because
Mm,
we didn't homeschool from the very beginning. And when we started to homeschool, we had moved out to some property and it was just like, yeah, y'all need to go. Y'all need to get, y'all need to, come to me if there's blood. But honestly, if this is not the safest place that you could be, there is no safer place in my mind. And so we were
mhm.
able to then, start homeschooling and find groups that were having that same kind of experience where we would get together and the kids would play for hours. I didn't even know, I mean, they're
Yeah.
old enough now. Nobody can call social services on me. But at that time, it was like, oh, you know,
But that
we'll
is
round
really
them
how
up.
life, yeah, life used to be like that. And if you want to read a book and have your eyes open, there's a book called Free to Learn by Dr. Peter Gray. And he is someone who studied basically like the biology of children and how childhood is supposed to be. And so he talks about how forever, like children have always just played, and they've played primarily on their own. There hasn't been adult oversight. And so the age that he talks about of the tipping point to where they're pretty capable of making decisions is 4. 4 is the age. And so he talks about how when he was 4, his grandma taught him how to walk to the store. It was a couple blocks away. And I don't know how old Dr. Peter Gray is, but I don't know, maybe he's in his 60s or 70s. But when he was 4, he would walk to the store by himself to buy, to buy his grandma's cigarettes. That's what he would do. But I mean, he's 4 years old, and I think today it's like we wouldn't even probably let our 14-year-old do that. And so times have really changed. But what it does when we let our kids play, and you have to go in stages, right? I mean, our kids don't necessarily they walk in the neighborhood across the street. They're in their teens now, so I think things have shifted a little older. But even if you're just there and kind of on the periphery, and so you're around, you can feel comfortable about that. But when they play away from adult eyes, there is so much going on in their lives that they're controlling and that they're learning. And then it's good for you too because you get a break. So that is one of, I think, the biggest things that people are concerned about with homeschooling is when will I get a break? Like, how am I going to be able to do this? And that's what happens. If you want a little time to read your novel, if you want to sew something, if you want to talk with a friend, that's where it happens. It happens in an environment where everyone is engaged on their own. You didn't have to pack a bunch of stuff in order to help them be engaged. And you just get to hang out in the sunshine or the wind or the rain or whatever it is. And have a fulfilling life while they're occupied. It's like a win-win.
So you and I seem like we probably had a similar ages growing up. And like you said, we had very little supervision. I mean, like there were some bad instances that I could point out in my life when that was occurred. But I tell people my brother and I did a paper route when we were probably 8 and 10. We got it at 4:30 in the morning, rolled the papers, went out on our bikes in the dark before the sun had come up in our neighborhood. I mean, and that is like, you tell that somebody now, just like a 4-year-old walking to buy cigarettes, and it's like horrifying. Do
Yeah.
you, in all of your research, do you see when that shift started, when we started to be more as parents controlling or fearful or unwilling to
Mhm.
let our children be independent?
Yeah, I think it happened in the 90s. It started in the 90s. And so there's a couple things that are talked about in terms of the tipping point. Schooling changed. So the No Child Left Behind, this verbiage that we're going to be bad parents because our kid is behind someone else's. So even programs like Head Start, they have this connotation that this is a race and you better start now so that you can get your child ahead. So that happened. And so there's a lot more focus on school. And then in the media, I think there was a lot more focus on abductions and fearful stories, though everything you read said kids are safer now than they ever have been. But that type of thing started to happen. So it's a combination of this extracurricular activity and schoolwork and tutoring, so no one's outside to play with. There's safety in numbers. So if you're going to go on a paper route with your brother, there's safety in numbers. If your kid's going to go outside and there's my father-in-law grew up on a street where within the first 6 houses on either side, there was 72 kids.
Wow.
72. There's safety in numbers. So, your kid's going to go outside and there's a bunch of other kids playing there. And so we lost that as well. So it was a lot of influences, I think. And then, you've got the video games that started to become more immersive in the 90s as well. And so kids are more enticed to stay inside and less enticed to be outside. And so all of that, I think, contributed toward a more indoor childhood.
What's interesting is that this generation, us as parents, we allowed it to happen, right? Because we grew up outside. I mean, my husband tells my girls stories about how in the summer he'd get on his bike and he'd be gone all day. I mean, and same thing, like make sure you're back before dark, right? When the street lights come on, like it's important, but it's, we allowed it. I don't know. Like I try to live intentionally and I don't ever want to be afraid. I think there's definitely things to be mindful of and whatnot, but I'm saddened when I look around and said, "Don't you remember we didn't have our parents around all the time. We stayed out. My parents let us. I was walking with my husband the other day and I said, my parents let us swim in our swimming pool in the summer with no supervision at night. Like I don't
Wow.
even I'm just now trying to be more comfortable letting my kids swim without supervision, right? Because I just
Mhm.
think not on my watch, but now my 18-year-old girls this summer got up and grabbed our paddle boards and went to the lake without me with their friends, which when you get to that point, that's sad too, because you want to be at the
Mm,
lake with your girls
yeah.
and their friends, and you have to also let
Can
that
I
go
go?
because they want some independence from their
Sure.
adventurous mom. But, we kind of bought into the lie that this is how it had to be and it was for the best for everybody. And your movement is helping kind of open people's eyes to the fact that like we're kind of duped. Like
Yeah.
we don't have to live this way anymore. And we're seeing, the detriment to our children because of these things, these
Mhm.
generations. So now that we can kind of reverse that, I think,
Yeah.
the being outside, the idea of homeschooling outside, education outside the box, all of these things, we're kind of getting our rebellious spirit back, and we're like, no, you can't tell me how to do it. I want to do it my
R-
way.
Right. Well, because I think it was well intentioned. I do think that it was well intentioned. It was just the wrong path. And so people are seeing the ramifications of that. And they're seeing the fact that kids are really struggling. And I know you're going to be talking to a young man named Sean Killingsworth. It's going to be just so amazing for your podcast. But what he talks about is basically how he lost his childhood. And he was so excited about having a childhood. He's in his 20s, early 20s, and he is in that guinea pig generation where there weren't that many boundaries placed on these things and kids were on screens all the time. And he didn't get that unhampered play that all of us got. And his story is actually really grieving. And so if you're homeschooling, it's an important one to listen to because it will increase your resolve to stick with it, because you can be the one that says, hey, when everyone comes over, we put our phones in a basket. You can delay a lot of those things. It's a lot easier because there's less pressure. And and it matters. It matters for your kids. They really get a different type of childhood than one where they're in a classroom and as soon as the bell rings, everyone's on their phone. Even within the classroom setting, I think in a lot of schools, kids are on the computer all day. It's open on their desk all day long. And so, from a homeschooling perspective, this freedom and this opportunity to get outside, to use your time differently, to have social interactions that are electronic free, these things are huge benefits. And I know it's so hard. It is a huge sacrifice. Often we're losing an income or we're having to work side jobs and all these types of things. It is a huge sacrifice. But especially when you listen to that Sean story, it will remind you that it is so worth it for you and for your kids, for everyone, because they're getting experiences in a different type of childhood that's more aligned with how it used to be and how their bodies are driven to learn through social experiences and to learn a little bit away from adults sometimes, to learn risk and all of those types of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the pitfalls that I have seen in our homeschooling communities is that, kind of like what we talked about in the beginning, when people make a choice to be countercultural, they succumb to this added pressure that they have to prove they made a good choice. So I know when I
Mm,
first started homeschooling my kids, I was not having the fun and enjoying it. And then at one point my daughter's crying and I'm like you're crying literally over handwriting without tears. Like drips like of tears. Like there's
like,
got to
I
be
need a
something.
refund.
There's got to be something wrong with this. But it's getting comfortable and getting a community around you that says, it's not about how they perform. It's not if they can keep up with their peers just because you're doing it in a different way. It really is a lifestyle switch. I like to tell people, like, you're coming to a different island. We have a different climate, different vernacular, and it's going to take you a while to assimilate. But because our natural tendency is just to want to do what we've always done in a different setting. And that
Mhm.
is not using homeschooling to its fullest.
Mhm. Yeah, it can be scary. A lot of people that homeschool, they went to public school for 13 years. So you're stepping into something that is brand new. I like a quote by John Taylor Gatto where he says, and it fits so well with your podcast because you talk about there's not a one size fits all approach. So John Taylor Gatto says there's as many ways to become educated as there are fingerprints. So there's
Mm.
complete individuality. So let me tell you a story. We have 5 kids, and I was really influenced a lot by John Holt, by John Taylor Gatto. John Holt has a book, it's one of my favorites, called Learning All the Time. And it's one of those short ones, so good for homeschoolers. But the subtitle is How Young Children Learn to Read, Write, Do Math, and Investigate the World Without Being Taught. So like, well, wait, what? You know what? That just does not compute. We start teaching kids, and I did. I started teaching our oldest his letters when he was 18 months. How ridiculous. I don't even know what I was doing. We were doing letter crafts. I mean, it was out of control. I can't even believe I did it looking back. But I over the years I read these books like John Holtz and how kids and Peter Gray they're biologically designed to self-educate. Self-educate. So that means I'm not doing quite as much as I thought I was so important. I'm going to direct it all. Well, no, they self-educate quite a bit. So for our oldest four kids, we waited to teach reading until they were a little bit older. So that's counterculture. We waited till 7. And actually, they say that the normal age of reading is like 3 to 12. It can be all the way into middle school. So we don't have to be super concerned about the timeline. But I thought, well, we're going to wait a little bit. The Waldorf school, they wait. In Finland, they wait. And we did this book, How to Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. And I know there's a
Mhm.
lot of great reading materials out there. Anyway, it worked fine with our kids. Well, with our fifth child, I was like, I'm so intrigued by this John Holt book. I'm like, could she really learn how to read and write without me explicitly teaching? And I tell you what, Janna, she sure did. I mean, she reads. I mean, we didn't do the book. So what happened is, she hit the age where she wanted to, and I know this doesn't work for every kid, right? So if you've got a child that has dyslexia, different learning styles, you're going to have to approach it differently. And that's the whole, it's not one size fits all thing. But it worked. And I think when you step into doing something differently in time, you become really confident because you see that little by little, it worked. It worked last time. It's working now. And you can step back and trust that your child is going to grow at their own pace and they're going to grow into this whole healthy person by the time they become an adult. And then they're going to continue to grow, right? Because here we sit. I was a math teacher. Here I sit on a podcast. I mean, as an author, this is not anything that I was trained to do. I was not good at English. I can't spell. I tried to spell the word yesterday, penitentiary. No idea. I don't know. I mean, like the spell check didn't even pick it up. I was so far off because this guy who wrote a book called Playborhood, Mike Lanza, he was talking about how our yards now seem like penitentiaries because there's so many fences everywhere. You can't see the other kids. So I was like taking notes, and I was like, I don't even know. I still don't know. I don't know how to spell it. So I mean, we continue to grow throughout our lives. So if we can love life, if we can know what we're passionate about, if we can be able to talk to other people, that type of thing, like those skills go a long way.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm in good company. I am a horrible speller as well. And
Okay, so you
I,
also can't spell penitentiary?
no, I'd have
I
to
mean,
sound
it's a
it
hard
out.
one.
I'd have to
I
like,
tried to
it's,
sound it out and I don't even know.
yeah. Well, our language is so bizarre anyways, but that is a good indication of it's not how intelligent you are. I tell my kids all the time, like, we're not going to get caught up on the nuances of how to spell. I've made it through my life. I mean, there are some people that is their thing. Like they want, and some people are naturally good spellers. So it's like, you just let them, like, that's great. I want to have, my daughter is just naturally a speller. Someone's like, hey, how do you spell this? Like, so I can at
Where is
least get
she
it
right now? So
started.
we can
Yeah.
ask her.
Yes. Where is she? Where is she right now?
And my
But
mom's good at that too. She'd be a great editor. I mean, this is the thing about life is that we come how we come. And I love, there's a Stephen Pressfield talks about how like, look, your kid comes into this world, you're not changing it. I mean, they are who they are. They're good at what they're good at. So focus on those things. I mean, homeschooling allows you, and I know there's a lot of people that talk about this, but homeschooling allows you to focus on their strengths. I will never be a book editor. Are you kidding me? There's no way. I put out typos on almost everything I do. Every day my mom's texting me and she's like, "Hey, you got a typo." And I try. I don't even see them. I can't even. I'm like, I know I have this problem and I still put them out. I'm
yeah,
trying to fix it and I can't. So
yeah.
homeschooling, I think, allows you to be the one that really focuses on what is it that that kid loves and is passionate about, and you have the time to dive into those things.
I think the fear of failure is what really starts to bog down homeschoolers. This sounds great, Jenny. I want to just be outside and play with my kids all the time, and I think I'll be happier, my kids will be happier. But how does that equate to the real world when things need to happen, and they've got to get into college? These are the pushbacks that we hear, right, when we are talking to people that this is a foreign concept to. And my first rebuttal is, how is this generation doing with that who are publicly schooled? Like, this is not a
Right, right.
homeschool versus public school. This is a society who has lost its love for learning. And
Mhm.
bringing that back in these types of movements is what is going to change and and kind of change our whole trajectory, I think, as a country, if we can let go, that we control. You said that our children come into the world as they are. I think a lot of the times in parenting, when I've butted heads with my kids, is because I wanted them to be different than who they were.
Mm.
And now, granted, I'm a disciplinarian. I believe in order. I have to have, things are there is order in this world, but
Mhm.
having the freedom to let your kids be who they are within that order is a beautiful thing. And a lot of
Mhm.
times when I hear people say, "Oh, well, I don't have the patience to homeschool." I don't know how you're around your kids that much. You hear all of these comments, and I
Yeah.
mean, and some days I'm like, I don't know how I'm around my kids this much either. Like they're horrible. Like I don't even want to
Yeah,
claim them
but
at
so are we
times.
sometimes. And I think that's the point. It's like to the patience piece, it's like, well, guess what? Parenting is a place where we grow. And it's a wonderful opportunity to have growth within your own self and to change to be a different person. I remember in my pre-parenting life, I taught math. Well, I was always good at math. And I taught piano and I taught guitar lessons. I mean, you see this pattern. I taught swimming, So you stick with these things that you're good at. And I would say that, until I had kids, I didn't really grow. I just did what I was already mildly good at. And then
Hmm.
you become a parent, and if you look at it that way, you grow as a person, and that's sort of the point of life. And I think to the fear question, which is a really big one, but it is interesting if you take a step back and look at it logically. We are setting our kids up for a world that is changing very fast. And the world did not used to change this fast. The world used to be a place where you would graduate from high school or you would graduate from college and you would get a job and you would probably keep that job for 30 years. And then you would have a pension and you would retire. And a large portion of the population followed that same path. Well, that does not exist anymore. What exists for our kids and for us, here we are sitting on this podcast. This wasn't a career option when I graduated from high school, it didn't even exist. So, our kids are going to enter a world where they're going to change jobs a lot of times. The average currently is 4 job changes within the first decade of adulthood. Four. That's 4 different sets of coworkers. That's 4 bosses, maybe more. 4 sets of skills. And so when we're looking to set our kids up for a world that's rapidly changing, they need the skills that come from downtime. They need the skills of creativity and flexibility. They need to be able to talk to a bunch of different people. They need to be able to come up with innovative solutions. They have to be risky. A lot of our kids are going to be entrepreneurs, so they have to be okay with writing their own path. And so that's the problem right now in 2023, 2024 with an adult directed childhood. Because what you have then is a child who graduates at age 18 and someone else has told them what to do for 18 years, for 15 years, for 13 years, however long. And then all of a sudden, they don't know what to do in this world that is changing so fast. And you even see it, like you see it with AI, it's disrupting the job market. And there are certain jobs that are becoming obsolete and they're becoming obsolete quicker than they used to. So we're going to have kids that can be on their toes and can shift. And the way that they learn to do that is by directing some of their own childhood.
I think that another big opportunity for parents, especially homeschool parents, since we're talking about them, is that modeling this ability to be flexible, to shift, to do things differently than even your neighbors or you were taught, or how the extended family does it. It's like, well, nobody else homeschools. Well, that's okay. It's okay that we're doing something different. I think, my girls
Mm,
were not lovers of reading, but over the years, with the amount of reading that we have done with our homeschool, and I read for fun. My husband didn't grow up reading, so he's not quite that modeling. He does read a lot on his phone, so that's one of those things. But it is like now my girl, they buy each other books for Christmas and birthdays. I mean, they're avid readers, but they saw that it when people homeschool, I think they're still in that idea that if I just tell my kids what to do, they'll believe that it's a
mm,
good choice and they'll do it. But I feel like when I have seen success in my homeschooling is when I've modeled for my children what to do, and then they are doing it. Just like being outside, we camp, we fish, we hike, we do all these things. Have If we had just said, we'll go out and do that, okay, fine. But when they see us doing it and see the fun that we're having, that's a whole nother aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, John Holt talks about that too in that same book, Learning All the Time, where he says young children, children in general, they need to get a sense of how work is done, how adult work is done. So they need to see a book written from start to finish. They need to see someone who's made a table. They they're so siphoned off a lot of times from the adult world, and then we kick them out into it. So how do you write an email? How do you have a phone call? How do you craft a life? How do you craft a family? I think that this part of homeschooling is so valuable too, even if things are going poorly and you have to adjust. This is life. We are constantly having to adjust, to change, to like, oh, that's not really working. So we're going to try something different tomorrow. And what a gift for a child to get a front row seat to that. I used to teach in the classroom, and before I had my own classroom, I substitute taught. And so one time, but only one time, because I was so tired at the end, I substitute taught for a kindergarten class. Okay, that was so exhausting. I was so tired, but it was broken down by the minute. Like it was, I mean, to the 3 minute, 4 minutes, you do this, the next 4 minutes, you do that. And the child never sees the backstory of that. They never see the why. They're just shuffled down this path. And I think for kids to be able to see even the dysfunction, even how we handle disagreements, even how we handle when there's a really bad day, when we're grieving, how do we still get up and live life? All of that. And when kids are home, you have a new baby that enters the family. I mean, I think that there are a lot of homeschool moms who feel guilty, right? They feel guilty because they've got a 7-year-old and now they have a new baby. And maybe the 7-year-old's not getting as much attention for the schoolwork as they used to. But guess what? That 7-year-old gets to learn, how do you add a baby to the family, right? And so all of that front row seat stuff is so valuable for your kids, even when it's rocky.
Yeah. You had mentioned in your book community and how you have built community, how community is really an important aspect of this idea that we're talking about, right? And in homeschooling, I have one advisor that works for us that she is on the East Coast, and they have literally zero homeschool community. Like she is just in a wasteland. Her words, not mine. But I loved when you talked about like, and this one I'm just going to pull it from the book because you said it beautiful. You said better to gather imperfectly than not to gather at all because our homes weren't tidy enough. And I think part of that breakdown that I've seen over the years was that that's the thing. People are like, well, my house isn't big enough. My house, I don't have the right decorations. It's a mess. I have 3 dogs. You come to my house, you're going to have dog hair in your scone. I mean, you just are. You're going to have a scone. It's going to be homemade, but there's going to
That's
be a
good for
dog
your
hair.
it's good for your microbiome.
So it's back to that idea of this fear. Like, if it's not perfect, I don't want to do it. I see it so many times with my kids. They want to go try something. Well, if it's not going to be perfect, I don't want to do it. And I caught myself in that kind of philosophy for a long time too. And it's just let it happen. Like you said, if it's not, if you can't open your home, if that's too big of a step for you, then meet at a park, meet at, a playground. Like there's baby steps. It's this all or nothing mentality that is, I think, driving our society. And I just want to shout from the mountaintops, like, it's not worth it. It doesn't have to be all or
Mhm,
nothing. It can be and, not either or. It can be and.
mhm. And when you meet at a park, those are actually such great places to meet up because there's no fighting about toys. You really get that breath. You get that exhale when you're out in nature because kids find things to do that nature provides. And so there's a lot of materials, there's a lot of sticks, there's a lot of sand and all that type of stuff. So it gives you that reprieve that you're looking for and a chance to have a conversation because we all know when you have little kids, you can hardly finish a sentence. But if you're in a space that maybe a large grassy field or a place that's bounded in so you're not running after a toddler you think they might go in the road or something like that. If you can find a space that's tucked back in a little ways or something like that, they'll they'll occupy themselves. You can sit and nurse your baby and talk to a friend and have a full conversation. You could call your mom, whatever the situation is. And so that's a great, I mean, I think that's a great first option is, hey, like let's meet up at the park.
Yeah. And you get your time outside, which
You do?
is so many benefits. We've touched on a few of those. So I want you to stay on for hours. I feel like we could do a whole retreat together and we would just talk the entire time. But out of respect, I will stop. But before we go, I would love to hear a homeschool hack that you could share with our listeners.
This is going to be lame. Well, my homeschool hack would be to go outside. That would be mine. But the reason I would say that is just because it's going to give you everything that you want. But I probably should come up with something better. But I don't really think I have anything. I'm like a one-trick pony. The homeschool hack, wait. Like
Mm.
you can wait for academics. So that would be another hack that I would have too, especially if you have a bunch of young children at home. So if you're in a season of life where you have 2 or 3 kids and they're 6 and under, you don't have to start now. You don't have to start all these formal things. You don't have to sit for hours a day. In fact, John Taylor Gatto says that it only takes 50 hours to reach, well, 50 to 100, he says, 50 to 100 hours to reach functional literacy. Hey, you probably have talked about this. I should have listened back. I'm like, maybe I'm being really repetitive.
Not
But
at
50
all.
to 100 hours to reach functional literacy. So that a child could read, write, and do math to the point where they could learn anything else that they ever wanted to learn. 50 to 100 hours. So that's 2, 3 weeks of school. That's it. So people are nervous. You got a 6 year old, a 7 year old, you got a baby, you're up at night, you're feeling like you're falling behind. But if you, I think you can get 50 to 100 hours within the whole year, within a couple of years, and you're going to get your child to the point where they love learning and they're going to go off and learn all sorts of things. They're going to leave you behind. I mean, my kids know things that I don't know. Isn't it wild? Like, they cross that threshold at some point where they know all sorts of things that you don't. So you can wait. There's no rush. There's no rush to be sitting at a desk for hours a day with your young kids while you're trying to juggle other little kids and that type of thing. So Steve Demi, who is the founder of Matthew C, he says the hardest part about homeschooling is toddlers. So if you have a bunch of those, you can just wait and you can play and bake and sing songs and go outside and take naps and rest and know that what you're doing is enough.
And it's more than enough because you're
Mhm.
being intentional, you're spending time with your children, and you're modeling for them how to be a lover of learning. And
Yeah.
so I think that that is beautiful. All right. Well, for those who are watching, make sure you get a copy of Ginny's new book. It's phenomenal. I'm not saying that because she's on my podcast. I'm saying it because I read it cover to cover. I even cried when I told her my review when we started this podcast. So that is legit from my heart. Ginny, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure. Like I said, geeking out a little bit on my end for hosting you on our podcast. I appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing to support the homeschool community.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be here. You could have had anybody else, but you reached out and had me, and I'm so thankful.
Want to thank you guys. Until next time. Bye bye.